Oh, and the lighting is changing. Hey everybody, this is Heather from Templebound Paradox, and today is the same day that I filmed my other video, so don't judge me, same shirt, don't care. And I wanted to also share some reviews of books that I've already read to kind of get a sense of what it is that I like and what it is that I read. I wanted to share 2 books today, and this first one is by Heidi S. Swinton, and it's called In the Company of Prophets. And this is about the personal experiences of D. Arthur Haycock. And he was kind of like a personal assistant to a whole bunch of presidents of the church. Heber J. Grant, George Albert Smith, David O. McKay, Joseph Fielding Smith, Harold B. Lee, Spencer W. Kimball, and Ezra Taft Benson. And he also had quite a few experiences with President Monson. And I'm assuming that he is deceased, but any of you who were contemporaries with me at BYU when President Monson, he went and he gave fireside or devotional or one of the two, and he was talking about his experiences with all of these different men that he's met throughout his tenure in being an apostle and being president of the church. And he told a story about Spencer W. Kimball and the holes in his shoes, and how Arthur used to have to take his shoes and hide them from him because he didn't want him walking around in holy shoes. That was this man. And so if you want it, that story is adorable and it cracks me up, and I just love it. And I love stories like that when you get just that flavor and the spiciness of these men as they serve in these callings. Arthur had, and that's what they called him, so that's what I'm going to call him. He had kind of like a front row seat to a lot of that cantankerousness and the insight into the private lives of what these men were like. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I think it's a really good read for anyone who wants to get more insight into the lives of the prophets. You know, we live in a culture and we live in a time that values, leaked emails and insider secrets and insider, perspectives on things. And while I disagree with the means and the theft that goes into breaking into someone's personal life like that, I really like it when people who have these types of experiences choose to share them. It goes into, chapter 1 talks about how he was prepared to serve and kind of his personal life and all of that other stuff. And then the rest of the book is broken down kind of by the individual man that it's talking about. And so you can kind of, it goes chronologically at the same time that it's organized by the individual that it's talking about. And so, and it also talks about how his position, depending upon who he was serving under, changes. And so you could almost sort of view it as he gets elevated and then he gets like shot down a peg and stuff like that, and goes in and out of different people's lives. Because I don't think that this was necessarily a calling, it was more of a job that he had. It would be really easy to imagine that he would take it personally, where, oh, I'm wanted here, but now I'm not wanted, but now I'm being brought back. And he doesn't take it personally, and one of the things that really struck me is that he's an incredibly humble person. And, I could just imagine, anyone who likes that flavor of like Downton Abbey and seeing the lives of the servants and stuff like that, like this book has a very distinct flavor like that, and not in a way that he was like subservient, even though, as someone who's being a personal assistant, that's kind of what they're supposed to do, really gel themselves into someone's life and to lift them up. That's exactly what this book kind of goes into, and that's kind of the distinct flavor that it has. So if you really like seeing that perspective on shows like Downton Abbey with just kind of like that service and everything and how to be a better servant, that's something that, as disciples of Christ, that we really care about. His example is one that I think is really worth learning from. So there's that one. And it's a short little book. It's 118 pages. I think I got through this in like less than a day. And so this is a good little book to get for someone who, wants to read church books but isn't quite ready for like President Monson's autobiography, which she also wrote. Heidi S. Swinton is a really great writer. She keeps it fresh. She keeps it moving. She has like lots of different experiences interacting with and writing with the prophets. She, I want to say, also rewrote one of the church pageants. So like there's the Hilkamore pageant, there's the Manti pageant, there's a Nauvoo pageant. She rewrote one of those. And so she has a lot of experiences with writing dynamically and keeping people engaged. And this is a book that I would give to someone as a gift. It is by Deseret Book, and I don't know, the price on the back says $12.95, but I'm also willing to bet that this is kind of an older copy. So I'll put a link in the description for where you can buy this, and I highly recommend it. It was a really good read. Another one that I really liked, and I read this several years ago, and it kind of became personally relevant to me again. I shared in the previous video that my husband and I are temple workers. You know, reading and studying and really internalizing the temple in a different way is something that becomes important when you become a temple worker. And it was important at the time that I bought this book. This is Endowed from On High by John D. Charles. And I think you can still get this at Deseret Book. I got it at, I think it's called This Is the Place bookstore in Washington, D.C. Really, it's in Kensington, Maryland. It's the bookstore near the D.C. Temple. And for those of us who grew up in that region, who joined the church in that region of the country, that's the bookstore that we're familiar with. So shout out to them. I got this book from their store, and I got it, I think, a week or two after I received my own endowment. And this, by far, is the book that I recommend the most for people that are receiving their own endowment and who, once they come out of that experience, like the prominent impression that I had was that I really needed to spend even more time in the scriptures, delving into and understanding the creation, understanding the spiritual relevance of a lot of what I saw in terms of symbols, in terms of just the way that temples have been relevant to our people over time, how that has changed throughout the ages and what has remained the same. That was something that I felt like I really needed to study. And this book, even though it's 103 pages long. Like, this is a tiny, tiny little book. And I love when people do that, when they take into consideration, if you can't handle something in less than 100 pages, can you really handle it at all? The brief just approach, the consolidation that went into making this book what it is, I just absolutely adored and loved. Because for someone who just went through the endowment, you can't take in every single perspective, every single detail and instance and all of just everything all at once. You can't do it. And so for someone who just received the endowment, I just wanted a way to get my arms around even just a small portion of what I saw, to begin laying the foundation on which I would build and continue to add throughout my experience of going to the temple. That was what I wanted. I didn't want something like The Holy Temple by like President Packer, or what's the other one? The House of the Lord by Talmage. I didn't want something like that that was really just going to be even more of a punch in the head than I was already prepared for. And that's what this book was. So like here on page 21, it talks about the use of sacred key words and why that's important and why that's relevant. And then it'll go into that then it moves on to another topic. And so it progresses, it's organized to progress through the endowment and through the different ordinances, through the initiatory, through sealings and stuff like that. It progresses naturally through all of those, the same way you would as if you were physically walking through the temple. Doesn't go into anything that he shouldn't, but still talking directly and addressing things that people would have questions about, and really incorporating tons of really good scriptures. I highly recommend this book. And when my husband and I got married, we actually discovered that we had 2 copies of this book, one that was mine and one that was my husband's. And since he wrote in his, we kept his, and then I ended up giving this to a friend of mine who ended up going to the temple to receive her own endowment, one of my friends from college. I gave this to her as kind of her resource, or just, you know, my I love you gift to her, and congratulating her and kind of helping her to prepare. It's great when you're preparing to go through. It's great when you have just gone through. And even for someone who really just, the endowment might have even become a little bit stale, or you're just not finding the same joy in it like you used to. You want to get back to the basics. When you say get back to the basics, that's the book that I think of. Endowed from on High by John D. Charles. So I definitely highly recommend that one. And that's all I have for you today. So as always, be sure that you hit that subscribe and like button. Leave a comment. Let me know how you like this review. Other books or topics that you'd like me to review. And thanks for stopping by, and hope to see you again.